Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 7th anniversary here of the DC Funk Parade on Black Broadway. And this particular edition, we're going to be discussing the DMV Music Stakeholders. My name is Aaron Myers. I chair the board of directors for the Capitol Hill Jazz Foundation, as well as I'm a host of Jazz Stories of WPFW 89.3 every Thursday from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. And I've had the distinct honor of being able to meet with these fellow stakeholders here in the Washington, D.C. area, greater Washington, D.C. area. And I want to introduce them coming from Listen Local first, and someone who is no stranger to the DC Funk Parade himself is none other than Chris Naoum. And Chris Naoum has been one of my chiefest defenders and someone who's worked very, very hard to ensure equity and equality is available for people in DMV when it comes to art and to music. Next, we have a tireless advocate who has worked greatly with the Capitol Bop, and that's none other than Jamie Sandel. And Jamie is someone who has been on the scene and getting his hands really dirty and trying to understand exactly from a policy standpoint how to help those in the DMV, and then someone who's worked for many years behind the scenes and to uplift a lot of organizations and a lot of events that we've taken advantage of here at the DMV. That's Stacey Williams, known as Jazz Cat Her, and she for many years, and some of you can remember the whammies before this current iteration and during this current iteration, has had a lot of her industry knowledge, I guess you could say, to help make sure it has been successful. But she's been a spokesperson for Virginia and understanding that the state of Virginia needs as much help as possible to ensure that its artists are taken care of and the artists are heard and their voices are being heard. So I want to thank all of you for joining me today. And I think this conversation happening among advocates and that we understand will be seen by the general public will be a conversation that should be had. Before we do that, though, I really want to thank Crystal, who is our ASL interpreter today, and thank you for ensuring that everyone can take part of this conversation and understand what is being done during this particular time. I want to kind of go round robin, and as many of you know, the DMV Music Stakeholders meets every Monday and Thursday via Zoom at 1 p.m. and we discuss the issues that we're all facing and how we have been impacted during COVID. The DMV Music Stakeholders started in March of 2021, and it has been able to grow and to be more inclusive of many different disciplines and genres, and also venue owners, nonprofit executives, and so on and so forth. But as we're here, I wanted to ask a question, do a round robin. I want to start with Stacey. What have we learned? What have we learned, and what have you learned during this time as you try to advocate for the arts? And what has COVID taught you in doing that in this particular process?
COVID has taught me that there's a lot of people out there that need help. It's also taught me that the music industry, the music profession, performers in the area are kind of unseen and unheard when it comes to needing assistance, be that a matter of pride or be that a matter of just not knowing who to reach out to, or just because statistics say our numbers are so small that our needs aren't taken into account in different iterations of how they go about funding and assisting people.
Jamie, what have you learned as far as when it comes to advocating for the arts during this time?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually see the specific work that the stakeholders are doing as kind of part of a larger trend that we've seen in our city during the pandemic. This kind of revived interest in mutualism, in the idea that, like, you know, we to survive, you know, as any sort of community, we essentially have to create systems of really communicating openly and making decisions collectively, and looking out for each other proactively, you know, and finding those people, like Stacey was saying, who have issues that they don't understand because structures that cause them are so huge, that kind of incremental stuff that only like a very large group of people like constantly talking and constantly looking out for each other can achieve. So it's been I'm really hoping that moving forward, we're able to like take a lot of the lessons that we learned out of necessity this year about how to keep on checking in on each other and apply that to some sort of sustainable, habit going forward.
Chris, someone who's, like I said, very familiar with the Funk Parade, but also very familiar with advocacy pre-COVID, and now that we have shifted to in this particular pandemic, what has this taught you?
Thank you, Aaron, and happy Funk Parade. This is amazing. Today is the day. It's Funk Parade has been part of my life for 6-7 years, so this is really a special day. It's sad that we can't be there in person, but I know that the next in-person Funk Parade is probably going to be the best one ever. And so I think that goes to what we've learned is that the world, our community, each of us individually need music so much more than we even realize. I think if you think about this community that we've created through music stakeholders has helped me get through, has helped all of us, I think, communicate, share, get through some of this pandemic. It's been a community that's been strong. I echo what everyone else has said in that, especially Stacey, in that like there are so many people that need help in this time. And so if we're taking a step back to think about who the community is and who needs help, like we're realizing that there's always more work to be done. There's always more people to be reached. But the power of music has never felt stronger. I think another big takeaway that we've learned is that what people have previously said are different silos of the music industry, whether it's by genre or by, venue artist relationship. We've seen over the past year that when people are in need, all the people will come together, when the community will come together to help. So I think we've learned to listen to each other and learn from each other, and hopefully leave a little more space to be able to understand the needs of others and how we can contribute and how we all fit together as a community. And I think that's been, I can say, I just remember the divisiveness in the different sectors and silos and whatever before Funk Parade. And it seems like, before pandemic. And it seems like a lot of that is breaking down. Who knows? I would love to see this coming together continue post-pandemic, although I worry that like when everyone goes back into their own ways and their own, goes back to old habits, some of the division will occur again. But what else I think we've realized is that as we see government and city and people plan different ways to help the community and problem solve, we've realized that in almost any situation, whether it's urban planning or community advocacy or creative advocacy, incorporating the thoughts and the words and incorporating musicians and creatives into that process always leads to better outcomes. And we've realized that, and the people who have worked with the music community have realized that, but there's still so many people that we're trying to reach in this advocacy process that don't get that. And like, I think my personal goal and our goal should be going forward is to continue to try to educate our elected officials, our community leaders about the importance of engaging with the creative community and the music community, because every single type of problem solving needs a creative approach and an approach. And it seems like musicians and creatives have always led the community-based creative incorporating everyone sort of approach to to problem solving, and I think we need more of that.
Yeah, I'd love to underscore that, Aaron. Like that's really, I think, at the most heart of it. When we're trying to quickly explain to people like what Capital Bop's philosophy for like promoting the music and championing the music and advocating for it is, we quote pianist Vijay Iyer, who said that the history of jazz music is a history of community organizing. It's like, musician communities have been taking care of themselves for a very long time because our society really doesn't have a lot of structures that take care of them, more broadly. So it's like I think that the entire point of the stakeholders' existence is really underscoring this idea that decision making and self-determination should come from within the artist community, because venue owners, musicians, promoters, advocates, have much more familiarity with the ins and outs of this very specific world than almost any government official is going to. And Chris is right, we really don't have a pattern of turning directly to artists to say, how do we need to handle the arts as a society, as a civil jurisdiction or whatever. And it's something that I hope that if our work is doing anything, it's kind of helping to drive that point home and maybe shift the ball a little bit.
What is unique in this particular instance, when we're asking what have we learned, we've each had to be problem solvers in our different areas, and I want to be in two specific areas. I want to know what we have learned in our outreach to the community, and then B, our articulation as far as solutions are concerned with the policymakers, those who can make change. What has this coming together through the stakeholders taught us about how we reach out to the community? How do we get data from the community? And then how do we deliver that data to the policy people? And I'll do it in the same order again, starting with Stacy and then going around again. And we want to be able to hear you, Stacy.
Sorry.
There you go. Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I think from the Virginia standpoint, there's a lot of skepticism. It's been really difficult to reach a lot of the artists in Virginia because it seems like there's this attitude of, we've heard this all before and we know what's going to happen with this. Nothing's going to happen with this, or everything's going to be about another region. It's going to be about Maryland. It's going to be about DC. Nothing's going to happen here. So I've been met with a lot of skepticism. And even from the local and state level, the focus is, while there is some focus on the arts, there is not focus on the creative artist himself. And there is not focus on the small arts businesses. Everything is looked at from either a nonprofit scale or a large for-profit scale. Unfortunately, in Virginia, there are very few, if any, programs that assist an individual artist. And on the state level, what's defined as a small business is somebody that makes $1 to $3 million. I would love to know a musician that makes $1 to $3 million and consider themselves a small business, but that's not realistic. So the guidelines for a lot of the funding and things in Virginia is unrealistic when it comes to an artistic business or an individual performing artist. What I have learned in gathering this information is I've been able to talk to the arts community, the Virginia Commission for the Arts. I've been able to talk to local arts commissioners in Arlington and in Fairfax County. I've also been able to talk to small business administrations and Chamber of Commerce in those areas as well, and talk to them about what it is the individual artist and the small creative business needs in order to survive during COVID and well after COVID. And of course, they sympathize with our plight. They want to hear more. They want to learn more, because it appears that this is the first time anyone has ever really gotten in their face to say these things to them. They knew they were out there, but it was few and far between from hearing from someone or from someone being specific as to what we need. We need affordable housing. We need more venues to play in. We need to be able to sustain ourselves during the pandemic. No one has come to the table with a clear outline of what it is we need and how we need it and what we need for those people to get in order to be satisfied with what we need and what we have to have in order to be functioning part of the economy.
Jamie, and I want to, and before we go to the next question, of course, I want to, as far as specifically, what have you learned as far as collecting data and how we, communicate with our community, and then what have you learned specifically with how we deliver that data to policy makers?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Aaron, because I think that's where the breakdown often happens in grassroots advocacy efforts, in my experience, in the district, is people get together and assess the need and state the need and organize around the need, but actually working in a very baroque, complicated political system, and trying to enter that political system as people with no insider knowledge in it is trickier. And it's taken in a lot of organizing case, it's taken people's other experience in other spheres, like your experience in government, for instance, to help us kind of get a leg up in that respect. But I think I also want to really completely agree with what Stacey is saying about how, I think the thing that governments are used to hearing in terms of the arts, or the way that they're used to conceiving them, is in terms of those larger, easy to understand institutional bodies or whatever. So oftentimes you'll articulate a specific need that you've heard from the community, and someone in government will be like, well, we already have the Commission on the Arts and Humanities in DC, for instance, or people will be like, well, we just created an arts district in this neighborhood, which means that they built a bunch of buildings and hired a sculptor from out of town to come in and make a statue, and that they're like, we have arts in our city. So I think in terms of data collection, Aaron, the reason it's trickiest is because a bunch of small, like a bunch of smaller communities of artists that all have specific needs, and they're all fairly anecdotal, and combining all of that information is incredibly difficult compared to trying to present some sort of standardized, developer speak to a city, about something really sweet and simple. So a lot of our work has just been literally meeting for 60 to 90 minutes twice a week, every week, so that people can just download the issues that they're having. We've heard every possible version of a problem that a venue owner or that could have with these venue support grants, or that a musician could have with their PUA. It takes time, and it takes a group of people who are meeting consistently enough to kind of try to distill down all of these bajillion highly individualized pieces of information down into some kind of coherent picture. I think that's a lot of what we're trying to do.
Chris, what do you say to
Aaron,
that?
I want to just add in here that I think I really saying that the artists, talking about this solely when we talk about one thing that actually I think prevents us from, that we need to do better, I guess, in talking about the needs of artists and advocating is that when we talk about artists, we're really talking about the needs of everyone. So it's no different. We talk about artist housing, but artist housing is just because it houses artists, but there's affordable housing is an issue for everyone. So I think we do need to do a better job of also linking up with the other sort of communities that are advocating for certain things. But then again, we've seen time and time again that the needs, specific venue needs during the pandemic, are different than a restaurant need that can still do takeout. So it's really just and also and we need to do that by explaining. Some part needs to be done by explaining numbers, like economic impact. And I think obviously we're collecting data, and there's every $1 spent at a venue, every is like $12 spent back in the community, or I'm probably botching these numbers, but like there are economic numbers, and I think unfortunately people of the administration only rely on the economic numbers. But I like to talk about what we did with Funk Parade at the beginning. I mean, it was an idea of bringing people together and creating a canvas to do whatever you want to do. Whatever you wanted to create, however you want to express yourself in the creation of the idea around the history of the city and music, or around funk, or around dance, or around, whatever physical artwork. It was if you create a canvas, and I don't know how to like express this better to like people who are like studying and are listening to the arts. If you created a canvas for people to create on and say, this is your space, create. That's essentially what the Funk Parade was. And look at what it's turned in from, like, 200 people organizing on a volunteer capacity to a 75,000 person music festival in the heart of the city. And this year specifically celebrating so much history of DC music. I mean, how do you take that idea? It's like, you government official, I don't need you to come up with an idea on how to fix something. I need you to listen and just give the space for the people who need to who can solve who can solve the problem at hand to solve the problem at hand, or create a solution for themselves. And just don't be a barricade. Don't get in the way of that solution happening. That's where we are now. I feel like there's so many people. I hate to hear, Stacey, what's happening in Virginia, because there is, obviously, like, I know DC government well. So a lot of times I'll talk about specifically DC government, and like Virginia, you're dealing with a massive state, and like the head of the state isn't even there. It's, somewhere else. So we're talking about Northern Virginia specifically. The artists you have like county people, city people, but like, there's just like this. I think we're lucky in DC that we don't have to climb the big staircase, to get to the top, because we're here. But Maryland has found a way. Their arts council has been very active on different levels. So I mean, it's all about replicating what's working and giving the artists the room to create for themselves and create the solutions they need.
But see, that leads me to the next topic: how much is too much? And when you're we all know one of the issues we all encountered lately as we put together the initiative and our priority funding initiatives that we sent to the council as far as DC is concerned. We talk to these policymakers, we hear from them, they hear from us, but then how much is too much? In two different ways. What causes, how to prioritize what we're going to be pushing to support the artist, but then how far is it too far to push those people who are making the policy? I'm going to start with you, Chris, on that, because that was something that you've had to I know that you've had to wrestle with. And how have you been able to have that internal fight?
I mean, I'll talk specifically to what was happening. Every week on the call, we come up with a new idea and plan. We share a new topic to tackle. And I'm really, I really wish we can hit on all of these levels, but I think again, the idea of having an administrator or an elected official say that, like, this isn't a subsect of people complaining about something, but this is people representing a much larger community, and the community, what they represent applies to the community as a whole, is something that takes a lot to break through. Like, I'm always worried, are we hitting on too many levels? Like, are we asking them for venue funding, artist funding, festival funding, minimum basic wage? Like, are they just gonna, the more we ask, are we going to just get shut down? And that's, for me, I mean, it's a constant struggle. So like, how do we need to prioritize? Do we need to pair, do we need to like bundle things together for them to make it easy to understand? I think it's a constant fight. I don't know how much is too much. I mean, right now we're sitting on harmonious living legislation that we thought was going to be the big thing, and that's been sidetracked because now the city is focusing on venue you know, on venue opening plans and PUA, which is also really important. I mean, everything is important. I think we need to be hitting everywhere at once, but I think we have to understand that not all solutions are they're not gonna take on everything at once. We need to be sharing our voices in all the arenas we can, but also understand that we're not gonna get wins everywhere. The wins are gonna come one at a time, and we just need to be patient.
And
Which
I think
sounds terrible, but I think that's actually reality.
well, and I think it's good for people who are watching to understand that when you are coming and introducing an initiative or a policy solution, that usually has a 3-year life before you'll see implementation. And the solution may not look like what you introduced the solution to be. A 1-part solution may end up being a 3-part solution that's implemented in stages, or something that you thought was a 3-part solution is actually lumped in with another subset group of people whose their answers also your issue, and that your other issues are now lumped in with someone else who answers someone else's issues, so that the policy makers, and specifically if you're looking to go into advocacy, remember when you're having any meeting with an elected official, that they've had 15 meetings before you, and they'll have 15 meetings after you, and you do not know exactly where your solution may either fit in to answer some other needs, or how the meeting before yours actually answered your need and perhaps maybe better than what you thought could be done, and you're now lumped in with a group of people. Are you so attached to just having your way accomplished? Are you more attached to seeing the need met, the solution implemented, where the need is being met within the community? And Jamie, I want to ask you, because you are approaching this from a younger standpoint, someone who's been able to kind of look at what has been delivered to you from advocates who have been on the scene before, and your extensive research and background as well on how you do advocacy in the space that you sit in. What have you viewed as too much? And is too much when it comes to what you're bringing to the table, and how far do you push the policymaker?
Right. Well, I think that you and Chris have already mostly hit it on the head here, and that, you know, you make it clear that the issues your community faces are complex, which means that there's a lot of different things that need to be addressed, but you kind of buckle in for, you know, a really kind of drawn out process trying to get even one thing accomplished. And, you know, something I've heard a lot of organizers say recently, especially as we're kind of seeing the horizon of this particular moment that spurred so much advocacy. You know, people are saying that kind of like saying that like truism that it's a marathon, not a sprint. You know, it's like if you try to sprint too hard, you'll exhaust yourself, and then in 6 months you won't be here anymore because you will have burnt out. You know, and so I think that really something that I'm learning the value of quite fast, you know, as someone again who's stepping into a world that the three of you have been you know, working in for a little longer, is just the importance of creating rhythms in your life that can help you accomplish this stuff gradually, you know. And if you can do that, if you can make sure you're checking in with people every week and really developing ideas with people, and, you know, like we were doing with the Music Venue Relief Act, kind of bringing an idea back around if it didn't, you know, like go where you wanted it to the first time, then you can start to take on a lot more at once, because you have this rolling, continuous, sustainable thing that's carried by not just you, but a bunch of people who can, you know, catch you when you fall or fill in for you when you need to drop off. We've all, I think all of us at different points in the call have needed to do that, and it's been okay, you know, because we got each other's backs. So too much, I don't, you know, that's a tactical decision, but ultimately you get a lot more done if you know, have some sort of rhythm and some sort of consistency and long-term commitment set up, basically.
Stacey, I wanted to know from you, because when specifically, not so much what is too much as far as being too much for the policymaker, but as far as the musician and advocate, What is too much as far as too much for an advocate to take on?
I agree with what Chris said with trying to prioritize what is the greater need. What do we absolutely positively need right now? What is it we'll need down the road? How does that fit into the artist's story? Is that something that the artist cares about? Is that something you can make the artist care about? Can you show them how this will benefit them? And most of all, you know, do we have a champion on the other side of the table that gets it? Otherwise, you're talking to the wind, and people are gonna have the mind frame of, yeah, we've heard this before, we've done this before, nothing really happened. What's different about this? So we really need to come at it from a perspective of making it personal, and sometimes painful. You know, if you press that sore with that scab, you understand that hurts. So if you approach them from a perspective of, I know this is painful for you, this might be embarrassing for you to talk about, but if you relay what you need, you have a better chance of getting a solution than to sit quietly and suffer.
I think that
which real quick on that, you know what I think is really what we found out is really useful, and it goes on what Stacey's saying, is that when it comes to stopping something, like a reactionary, like something happens and there's a quick reaction against it, you know, the music community is the musicians are amazing advocates because they all have followers. So if there's something that comes up that like strikes in such a negative way, I think the music community is automatically very successful at combating that. Like the amplified noise, you know, legislation comes out, everyone strikes, gets their follower shut down immediately. Like that type of, I think the music community is very, very, very good at that. So we know that, like, I think the music community is protected, you know, not to think about what's the bad thing that'll happen. Cause like, if it's something like that's bad coming down, like for example, I'm not worried about the amplified noise legislation right now, because I know the second it comes out, emails will flow, Twitter, protests, like boom, it's going to get shut down. I am worried about strategically getting people to understand what harmonious living is and future thinking about how we want to prevent displacement of artists. You know, it's also evaluating your strengths, and because we know that like something bad happens or something negative, the music community can jump on it and it'll shut it down. And we can take action that way. But like it's thinking about the creative ways to use the power that the music community has to like do the long-term thinking. I think there's a lot that can be done in that.
We need to go beyond putting on a show for a cause. We need to dig a little deeper with that, because as musicians, we're good with, hey, let's put on a show. But we need to kind of go beyond that and go behind the scenes and go to the meat of the problem and who can solve that problem for us.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, it occurs that for anyone who's watching or listening to this who doesn't know the things that, you know, about the things that Chris is referring to, there's a whole world of, you know, issues and advocacy needs specifically relating to the regulation that this city has on what volume of noise can be performed or what volume of sound can happen in an outdoor space in the city. And that has been a battlefield for years now in the city, with street performers essentially having the police, you know, weaponized against them because of the concerns of new residents of poorly built apartment buildings that don't shut out this noise. So there's, you know, I think hopefully we can provide some way for folks to learn about the issues that we kind of talk about all the time, but things that you wouldn't even expect would kind of shape the cultural landscape of a city over decades of development and regulation. That's the kind of stuff that Chris is talking about, that this not 1 week, but 10-year, you know, effects of what does get advocated for or what doesn't.
I mean, that's the big thing now.
I think it's important for people to know that what Jamie just said, what all three have just kind of put out, is the beginning of not understanding the importance of certain nuances in legislation or policies that may not require legislation, That's how go-go was pushed out of Washington, D.C. That's how venues were pushed out of being able to open on U Street or to remain open on U Street. Speaking to that pain, as Stacey was speaking about, I mean, we had to utilize that with, Twins shut down, the difficulty that Blues Alley has experienced, using that, communicating that to policymakers. 18th Street Lounge was closed down, or the issues that Tropicalia has dealt with, and the difficulties that all of these venues have dealt with when Alice's Jazz had to close down, and I think now they're going to be able to reopen. But all of those moments, those painful, putting that pain out there in full display, which has been very embarrassing. But there's other places that musicians may have been embarrassed to speak about, like the unemployment. When you have to speak about your unemployment, it forces you to talk about maybe the disparity that you're experiencing when it comes to food, access to food and to housing and things of that nature, and finances are put out there. And I always tell people the most embarrassing or vulnerable spaces you can be in is when you're forced to move because your life is in boxes and people see all of your stuff out there. Your life is, boxed up and put in a different place. And it makes me think of now, as we go to the call of action. And I think it's important for those who are watching now to understand that the DMV Music Stakeholders do have funding priorities. We do have a message for the city, and the priorities will be as listed. Continue to fund DCCAH, the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities, at the same level it was funded in 2021, which was an increase level. Other priorities for 2021 is guidelines for reopening, and these priorities are available. We have them available, and we can send them out to people. I believe you go to Listen Local, you'll find a tab to them there. Am I correct, Chris?
You'll find a number of our filings, letters we've sent, so you can see through that. But it would be a good idea to do like a priorities tab. I think that's something we're gonna have. But if you go through our filings, you'll see our letters. We have funding priority letter that we sent in. We have guidelines for reopening letter. Just you can scroll through any of the letters we've sent to the city or testimony we've filed on behalf of the state.
And many of these, if you've been on the email list, I know many people who are watching have received emails, summaries of the meetings we've had and the videos from the meetings we've actually been able to tape, and shows how old I am, able to record and send out, of course. So the guidelines for reopening, of course, centered around science. We'll talk about that in a moment. Introduction and passage of the Harmonious Living Amendment Act of 2021, which has been introduced, and that Chris mentioned. Adoption of a citywide fair trade music framework, something that good friend of ours and tireless leader Graham Smith White has been working on for a number of years with the union. Incentivize music production, recording, and industry job training, and the district that deals with particularly infrastructure. Build relationships with the national music industry companies to grow local resources, something that we all have had to deal with. We tried to have to advocate for our individual careers, realizing that those relationships were not already established. City planning and zoning coordination with music community. Anybody who's had to unload and load or want to do music at certain spaces. Sometimes we've heard of house concerts being shut down because of being unaware of zoning situations. Transportation, sidewalk, and music industry. This is the city jumped to open up sidewalks and street parking for streeteries, but the music industry venues complained for years about the lack of designated loading zones in front of venues, leading to musicians and tour buses getting ticketed. The city did nothing to address the problem. This is an issue that will need to be taken seriously when venues reopen. If the streeteries are made permanent, there will be even less available loading space around our beloved venues. What that does, actually, it creates a division between streeteries that are also small business owners and people trying to make it, and also musicians and those venues who need this. There should be some type of coordination. DCRA, especially permitting in temporary spaces, which I want Chris really to specifically talk about. And then the increased access to outdoor spaces for presenting for those people who are dealing with nonprofits and venues who want to have outside spaces to present, as well as festivals. And especially if you're a festival that has multiple spaces to you need to present your art, that becomes an issue. And so when I'm looking at the call to action and we talk about priorities, I want to have what they call a given. It's a given that all of these things are issues and they're all priorities. So I don't want to create the false narrative to make one feel one is more important than the other, because all of them are equally important. And as the conversation has been had today, we've discussed somewhat of what we've learned during this time about how we approach some of these solutions, how we gather data to deliver the solutions, when we gather presenting the solutions, what those solutions may look like, how long those solutions may take. There's something we want to make sure is underlying that we need so that the city can see the industry that we're in now as a priority. Right now, many schools in Washington, D.C. do not have access to instruments. Many schools in Washington, D.C. do not even have music programs. Many educators do not have the tools and the resources to teach their classes when it comes to music. And if you fast forward to those who are professional musicians, many people who are as legendary status, thanks to Reverend Dr. Sandra Butler Truesdale, do not have the end of life care they need. Many of them, when they pass away or they're sick, they're left destitute. And many of them, once they're unable to perform anymore, have no way of making income so that they may be able to live and have basic needs. So at the beginning of life, and the beginning of one's music career in school, and at the end of one's career, we see that they have been left off the fringes. So as we speak about this middle ground here and some of the priority levels, I want to speak about these with those things as given. Okay, so we all understand that if you're in your career now, you will reach the end of it. And as we said right now, there's no support for you. If you're looking to get into the music industry and you want to make sure that your children are able to have access to it, the school that they're in right now may not have it. And if they do have music, they may not have the resources to have the instruments. The Capitol Hill Jazz Foundation did an instrument drives and donated instruments to schools because schools didn't have it. So as we look at our funding priorities right now, I want to start with Chris, Stacy, and then Jamie in that order. The two things that you know that you will be championing for sure out of the list that we have that everyone will have availability to, what are the two things that stick out to you that you know you need the people watching this call to support us with?
Oh man. I mean, that's like narrowing down. I think all of these pieces that you talk about work in harmony with each other. And I think they're all pieces of a larger, how do musicians help shape and create the better community they want to live in? I think obviously first is livability. And with livability comes opportunity to perform, fair wages, minimum basic income, fair housing, affordable housing. I mean, that's all one. That really is one thing, which is crazy because it's so much. But livability, and then it's this idea that, like, look, we talked about spaces and stuff, right? How much of downtown now is going to be empty? Storefronts are going to be empty, like because people moved out. You know, they're talking about the space and the building space in downtown. Artists can bring space to life. And we live in such an economy where how's it going to make money? How's it going to make money? This city has plenty of damn money. All right. All the cities are governments. Arlington has money. Virginia has, Fairfax has money. Montgomery County has money. PG County has money. Everyone has money. Okay. And there's plenty of things. Obviously, education first. Let's get education. Let's give education more funding. Let's make sure there's housing. But also, like, the fraction of amount of money you can allocate in a creative way to artists to be able to create and bring spaces to life and engage the communities and create these outlets for people to want to spend time in the cities and want to live in the cities and want to enjoy the creativity of the space around them, because that's why we come together as humans, to celebrate culture, to learn, to celebrate creativity. I mean, that's what we want as humans living in a space aside from livability. So those are the two things: allow creativity to flourish and allow people to live in the city. So those are my two priorities.
Stacy, what are you, out of the list that we want to be able to hear you? Are those two areas? Where do you see the two priorities? You know, out of the areas that we all listed, Unmute for me if you could. You're muted.
Am I up now?
There you go.
Okay, definitely livability. When you aren't serving your basic needs of food, housing, and shelter, everything else becomes difficult. But if you know you are making a living and sustaining a living that will keep a roof over your head, it makes it much easier to continue with that profession, to continue with that livelihood, and to do it in such a way that it grows and expands and gives you what you need. The other would be definitely education in the schools, music programs in the schools. You know, you see a lot of kids, especially Black and brown kids, who want to be musicians as a career. They don't know how to start. They can't afford an instrument. They don't know, they don't know anybody up close and personal that's doing it to show them the way or to act as mentors for them. Or, the choice of being a musician is looked upon as something less than professional. Get a real job, that type of thing. So I think we need to, in addition to education and music donations and instrument donations and what have you, we need to really raise the bar on the educational level of people understanding that this is a business, this is a career, this is a profession.
That's very important that you said that. I know early on I remember Chris used to try to have some of those professional meetings, in a sense, to educate on the show business side of things, the business of things. The people were greatly empowered to do that. Jamie, out of the many calls you've been on, what are two things that stick out to you that you know are priorities that we need to focus on?
Yeah, I think so many things have been really well articulated by Chris and Stacey already. I think that for me, priorities along the lines of, these explorations we're making into minimum basic income for artists, and especially like things like continuing to fully fund the DCCAH. There are lots of issues with granting programs, and I say this as a proud and grateful, organizational grantee of the Commission for many years, as well as the NEA and other funders. There's a lot of things to be improved in that. The system of granting and the nonprofit industrial complex and this whole world. But I think that overall, something that I really, really thematically that I really, really want to make sure that the kind of general public understands is that our system is not built to take care of art. It's just not. It's like art has been holding on for dear life for centuries off of philanthropic wealth culture. And that's fine. It's worked. But the fact is, some of the reason it's so hard for us to do this kind of advocacy is because we're not lobbyists. We're not paid. Our industry is not able to funnel tons of money into getting us into the room with politicians. We do it in our own time because we care and because we know that the issue is there, that the need is there. So, just for people more broadly to understand that, art needs proactive help, and this is not in a charity kind of setup. It's more just that we need to understand that we all have a debt to art, and especially to music, in my opinion, in our lives. And you can respect that debt, I think, by advocating for this public funding to support the arts in your city, to purchase music, to go to concerts, to actually put both your money and your money advocacy where your mouth is, if you want to continue to have your city be a center of culture, and in a city that is having a lot of power exerted over it by a lot of forces that are backed by a lot of money, especially right now, maybe more than ever, or more than in a long time. That kind of citizen advocacy for funding the arts respectfully and both with your own pocketbook and with public funds is really, really crucial given the system we have,
I think Jamie said something very important that we want the audience to understand. He said something that is very much straight on and spot on, that has kept DC in the area or in the spectrum of being potentially a music city for the last 50 years.
Mhm.
DC's always been the potential on the cusp of, and we see over and over and over some fantastic musicians that leave Washington and within a matter of 5 years in their other locations win their Grammys, are in films and taking care of the business. But then Washington wants to take the credit for cultivating that. So before we do our closing, there's something I just want to say. I think it's time for DC to put on its big boy britches, its big girl pants, and actually step up and support the arts in a real way. You see what your priorities are by looking at your pocketbook. And if you ever done any type of forensic accounting and you want to know exactly what you're spending your money on, what you care about, they're tied hand in hand. And the city puts more money toward the police than it does put it toward education, music education, and the arts. And that is sad. We're a sad example of what could happen and what should happen when it comes to the humanity of music and musicians. The fact that we don't have a minimum basic income for artists in Washington, D.C. of all disciplines is appalling and it's disgusting. In 500 years from now, when they decide to look at what made us tick and why we did what we did, they'll look at a few laws and there'll be a few biographies they could read, but they will examine our art and our culture, our music. And because we have not fostered that, they will see the struggle. And no matter how much money they take away from us, it's the music and it's the art that will live on and tell their stories, regardless of how they treated us and in spite of themselves. So I encourage the audience to move out of the area of potential and move into the area of priority and treat yourself as a priority with your elected officials. You should know who your ANC director is. You should know who your city council person is. You should know who your county executive is, who your county representative is. You should know who represents you on these arts councils, whether you're in Virginia, Fairfax, if you're in Montgomery County, PG, or in Washington, D.C. And most of all, you should reach out to your delegate in Congress. And that's to those who don't have a representative in Congress right now, because in order for DC to have a vote in Congress, it would mean that we'd be voting Democratic and we'll be people of color. And white people in Congress don't like that. So that's what we're dealing with right now. So what I wanted to make sure we knew all of this stuff and was straight on about this is that this doesn't have to be this way. We could have education and children can have instruments in school if the city wanted it to happen. Our elderly and the people who no longer can perform could have the decency in their golden years if the city wanted it to happen. And we as artists, we can have the resources and the infrastructure we need if the city wanted it to happen. Right now, the city has made it very evident they don't want it to happen. And it's going to be up to us to make ourselves a priority, to move ourselves from the peripheral and to put our needs in the purview and to educate them along with solutions that we know can be implemented. And until they decide to put the money where their mouths are, instead of going to other cities and testifying how great they are and how great they support their cities, whether it's in Las Vegas or whatever city they're in, talking about the great things they're doing with art and propping up go-go to show that DC really cares about. I'm just sick and tired of it. And the tireless efforts of everybody on this panel is a testament to what can happen when the music is so powerful that it moves from the bandstand to Zoom, to the boardroom, to the city council halls, to the living rooms, so that it may help fund itself, support itself, prioritize itself, and to encourage itself. So we want to thank, of course, the National Endowment of the Arts. We want to thank the DC Humanities Council. We also want to thank the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities for their support. We want to thank Crystal for doing the hard work of following this Southern accent and the accents of all of us here on the call to deliver a good message to those who are watching. We want to thank the musicianship for the hard work they've done, and DC Funk Parade, of course. Real quickly, could you tell us, Chris, how people can learn more about Listen Local?
www.listenlocalfirst.com. You can visit us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Listen Local DC, Twitter. You can also find, that's the best way to find out on all the events we're involved in, the advocacy we're involved in, and make more space for arts, and people don't expect ROI on arts, just fund the arts and tax rich people more.
Absolutely. Jamie, how can you learn more about Dr. Bob?
That's a spiritual ROI, Chris. It heals your soul.
Yeah.
Capital Bop is grassroots jazz advocates, concert presenters, journalists, media people. We've been doing it for over a decade now, doing DIY presentations of the music and a lot more. So you can find out at capitalbop.com. That's with an A, CAPITALBOP.com. And we're also on all the different socials except for TikTok. Soon. That's Capital Bop. Check out our YouTube channel for a lot of really beautiful windows into a really special scene of artists.
Stacey Williams, who's often been the only person of color in the room and the only one in the room on many occasions. Tell us more about the Jazz Cat Herder and how people can understand.
Jazz Cat Herder is a concert festival and event production company. I also have a series of workshops that I teach to middle and high school students and their parents regarding the business side of the entertainment industry. I have been a longtime advocate of the Washington, D.C. music scene through WAMA, through musicianship, and also through arts administrators of color. I can be reached at Jazz Cat Herder on Instagram and Twitter, and also jazzcatherder.com. But what I really like to say is anybody from Virginia listening to this conversation, know that this is for you too. I know a lot of the stuff that we talked about, we focus specifically on DC, but the things that are happening in DC are going to or will happen where you are in Virginia. So you need to be aware, and you need to join with this band of people for camaraderie, to understand what's going on and to help each other, because that's what we're here for.
Thank you. And I'm Aaron Myers, Aaron at aaron2.me, as well as chair of the board of directors of the Capitol Hill Jazz Foundation. And you can find that at capitolhilljazzfoundation.org. And that's with the O, capital, the O, hilljazzfoundation.org. And I'm also an artist myself. So I put out a new album. You got to check it out. The Pride album is out right now. I'm going to plug it until I can plug it any longer. Now I'd like to turn it over
Aaron,
to the Pride album. Yes.
Aaron, real quick, I should say, just for people, I think that we might not have given the full picture here, but we are still representatives of a hundreds of people coalition. We meet twice a week. If you're a member of the public, doesn't matter what you do, what your relationship to the music is, hit us up on socials. We'll get you connected, and you can start coming to these meetings. You can
get lots of emails. You can get emails twice a week.
But that's okay.
Please, thank you for joining the DMV Music Stakeholders, and I believe we have hit our time. And if there's a call to action from the Funk Parade, we can now have that. Otherwise, we want you to continue fighting. Understand that you are a priority. Make yourself a priority. And sometimes I don't want you to fight for a seat at the table. I don't want you to bring your own chair. Bring your own table. Bring your own chairs. Bring your own food. Okay? And then you set the table yourself. I have no need to sit at the table if somebody's denied me food or resources for a long time. I'd rather put my own table out there and do things the way I would want it to be done to begin with. So my name's Aaron Myers. I hope that you can tune in to me every Thursday from 2 to 5 on WW. And I appreciate it. I love you so much. And thank you again, Crystal. Thank you, Funk Parade. And let's keep things going and support the musicianship here in Washington, D.C.